This is the 18 Strong Podcast with Jeff Pellizzaro, episode number 23.
Welcome to the 18 Strong Podcast, where you get direct access to the world's greatest experts on training harder, practicing smarter, and playing better golf. Now, here's your host, Jeff Pellizzaro.
All right, welcome to the 18 Strong Podcast. I am your host, Jeff Pellizzaro, and this is going to be a pretty special episode of the 18 Strong Podcast, I have to say. I've got a good buddy of mine on the line, and unfortunately, I can't really introduce him to you guys because there's some special circumstances around this interview today. So just full exposure. I was actually running a little behind as far as getting a podcast out for this week. I had a couple guests lined up. Things fell through, and wasn't able to get the interviews done that I wanted to get done to get the podcast out in time, which, we release every Thursday morning. And so I called up a buddy of mine that I met a few years ago, and he's a U.S.-based strength coach. He's worked with athletes from all across the nation. He's written for a few different publications and does some speaking around the nation. So I figured, you know what, I'm going to give him a call. We have been, we kind of lost touch for a little while, got back in touch not too long ago, and we've been conversing back and forth, and especially with the podcast, been talking about some stuff. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to reach out to him, last minute favor from a buddy, and see if he wouldn't mind coming on the show. He's an expert in program design, nutrition, working with athletes, all kinds of stuff, but not based in the golf world. And so I called him up and said, hey, would you mind helping me out coming on the podcast? He's like, yeah, sure, that'd be great, but I have one stipulation. We're not going to use my real name. And I was like, I kind of understood it, kind of thought it was weird, but at the same time, I was like, all right, well, let's have a little fun with this. So we have decided we're going to create an alias for this guest, and his name is forever now known to be T.E Frances. And he is what I'm going to refer to as the Heisenberg of strength and conditioning for all of you Breaking Bad fans out there. So, T.E., welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
You bet. This has been a long time coming, and I'm very excited to have you on the program. Normally, this would be the time where I say, give us a little bit of your background, give us a little bit about you, but obviously, given the circumstances, we're gonna keep everybody in the shadows and not give them the opportunity to really know who you are or figure out your background just yet. And who knows, maybe in years to come, the light will be shined and the hood will be opened. But basically what I wanted to do today with you, T.E., is basically, we've talked a lot in the past about, just training different clients and athletes and golfers and the people you've worked with. And I've really learned a lot from you as far as, from the strength and conditioning side, me coming from the physical therapy world, learning a lot about, how to properly design programs and, the things that you do. And for those of you out there that aren't strength coaches or in the strength and conditioning world, writing a program really is an art. And for the ones that are really good at it, like TE is, there are so many intricacies of a program that the normal person wouldn't think of, the normal strength training coach wouldn't think of. And so we're going to get into a lot of the details there. But I think one thing I wanted to talk to you today about, first of all, is just when somebody's designing a training program for a client or for themselves, they have to figure out what the right goal is. And you and I had a little conversation a couple days ago regarding the goals of a golfer. And a lot of guys want a golf workout. And you said to me, I think, quote, there's no such thing as a better golf workout. Can you kind of expand on that a little bit?
Sure. Everybody comes into the gym with an idea of how they want to improve their performance for any given sport. So it could be a golfer, it could be a football player, it could be a hockey player. I want to be a better golfer. I want to be a better football player. I want to be a better hockey player. It doesn't matter what the sport is. Every coach takes their client or athlete through some type of evaluation. So for me, there's strength testing, there's muscular balance testing, mobility, etc. From there, you have to identify what the athlete's limiting factor is. So what physical quality can we train in the weight room that is going to make this person, this client, a better athlete, not specific to their sport yet. Most people have to train generally before we can get into a training program designed for a specific sport. So there's going to be a physical quality. You have to break it down. What's going to make this guy better? Is it going to be hypertrophy, mass gains? Is it going to be fat loss? Is it going to be strength, mobility, and kind of approach it that way? You can't really train to be a better golfer in the weight room. If that were the case, the strength coaches of the world, the weightlifters of the world could walk out on the course and shoot under par day one. That's just not the case.
Right. And, we've talked a lot on the show about the importance of getting evaluated and getting those things looked at. And when you find out, let's say you find that there's some mobility issues, there's some strength issues. Most of the people listening to this podcast are your typical golfer, possibly in their 30s, their 40s, whatever. They go in, they get evaluated, they've got some mobility problems, they've got some strength stuff, they don't have the power they want. Can you get all that at the same time? Can you train in one program to get all that and work on all that?
When you first start out in weight training, you're going to be able to bring up multiple qualities at once. So you can kill multiple birds with one stone. If you've never trained before, just training through a full range of motion with your body weight, progressing to externally loaded exercises, you're going to improve your mobility and strength, and eventually you'll get some hypertrophy gains out of that. So for the very beginning stages of training, you can increase multiple qualities. The longer you've trained, you're really going to have to hone in on one specific quality.
Okay, and is there one in particular that when you're working with somebody, that you kind of go after first if they do have a couple different ones?
Like I said, there's different stages of training. Initially, the first 4-8 weeks is going to be learning to train. So basically programming yourself to go through the right motor patterns, just basic exercises. Like I said, again, at this stage, sport doesn't matter. We're going to be doing split squats. We're going to be doing chins. We're going to be doing pressing exercises. Really just every plane of motion you can think of, we're going to learn how to move in that plane properly.
All right. So I think that's a real important point to show to the audience, is that if you've never been in and worked with a strength coach or, a fitness pro or anything, and you're a golfer, you're going in and you say, I want to get my golf game better. And that strength coach runs you through an evaluation, and then they start taking you through exercise, and you're like, well, this just looks like the same exercise that guy's doing over there. This isn't a golf exercise. What would you say to somebody that said that to you?
For sure. It's definitely, if you have two beginners, one's a football player, one's a golfer, they've never trained before, programs can look very similar because you're both learning how to move. That's the biggest thing. You have to learn how to move before we can get into the specifics of your sport.
Yeah, there's so many different things, intricacies and movement patterns and things that if you can't squat, you can't touch your toes, you can't, do certain things, your body's all out of whack, left side's stronger than your right side. I mean, just getting in and getting moving and starting to get your brain wrapped around those movements is kind of the first quality. And I can't tell you how many times I've had somebody come in and I'll have them do like a squatting exercise, and they're like, well, can you explain to me again how this is gonna help my golf game? And, after you take that question so many times, you start giving some smart ass answers too. But, you just kind of have to explain and educate. And for those of you listening, there are certain movements that we have to be able to do, and they correlate with your golf swing, whether you see that correlation or not. The fact that it doesn't look like a swing doesn't necessarily mean that it's not working on your swing. It could be working on your balance, your tempo, your range of motion, all that stuff. So, T.E., a big part of why I wanted to bring you on today is, I've learned so much from you regarding program design, and I've had a lot of questions, and I've had a lot of people come up to me asking me about, they're just kind of getting started in going into the weight room and stuff. And, some of these are buddies of mine that, they don't want to go work with a trainer. They're former athletes, collegiate athletes, and, they've kind of worked around the weight room a little bit. And so they enjoy going in and kind of figuring some of this stuff out on their own too. But they've asked me like, okay, what kind of a program do I need to put together? What do I need to include? What exercises, et cetera? And we've talked a lot about, well, let's figure out what your goal is. Because if you don't have one goal in mind or a particular goal, let's say that this is a guy that has a little bit more experience training. Let's talk about the idea of training for a specific goal, such as fat loss, strength, size.
Okay, so I've very rarely seen an athlete that's not going to benefit initially from gains in hypertrophy. So let's start there. When you design a hypertrophy program...
Well, hold on, T. First, just explain to the audience, because a lot of them, some may not even know what that term hypertrophy means.
Hypertrophy is muscle gain. Sorry about that. So muscle gains. There's a few things you need for gains in muscle mass. You need longer time under tension. So what that means is you're going to need your sets to last anywhere from 40 to 70 seconds. Often you'll see guys in the weight room, a set of 10 reps may only last 10 seconds. For greater gains in muscle mass, you're going to want that set of 10 reps to last longer, 40 to 70 seconds, like I said. You also need an anabolic hormone response. So there's a number of hormones that we want to elevate in our training sessions. Testosterone, IGF-1, growth hormone. Those are all going to speed your gains in terms of muscle mass. From there, we know we want to create muscular damage. We want longer time under tension, and we want an anabolic hormone response. So how do we get those things? How do we create that response we want? You're going to do that through repetitions in the 8 to 12 range. You're going to do anywhere from 18 to 30 sets per session. And again, all of those are going to last 40 to 70 seconds each. And you're going to favor rest periods anywhere from 45 to 75 seconds. That's kind of the basic layout for hypertrophy. Probably anywhere from 6 to 12 exercises per session. And you always want to create some type of balance in your training. Unless you've identified a specific weakness, you should be doing a set of pull for every set of push. You should be doing a set of knee extension for every set of knee flexion. So balance it out. Like I said, unless you've identified some type of muscular weakness, and in that case, you could increase the volume of that specific muscle trained.
Okay, that's great, because we've talked about, the importance of balance. Your body needs to be balanced. We do so much stuff in the pushing directions in front of us, and driving and sitting and swinging the golf club, all that stuff, that the pull is so important and often overlooked, I think, in a lot of different programs. So this is kind of an outline, and I'll kind of put some of this stuff in the show notes for you guys. So we'll have some written out numbers and ranges and all this stuff, so you can actually take this stuff when you're kind of putting together a program, and you can already see how detailed a true strength coach gets when they're working on different goals, different training programs. So again, I'll have this kind of laid out for you guys. So that's the hypertrophy. That's the bulking up phase. That's pretty much what every dude wants, for the most part, that goes to the gym.
Sure.
He wants to go in. He wants to pump the chest. He wants to get the biceps going. Obviously, there's a lot more to it than that. But so this is kind of the starting point. If this were like your first round in a hypertrophy phase or a bulking phase, then what factors would you kind of think about as you move into the next phase or the next program design? So for those of you out there listening, when TE's drawing up a program and we're creating a program for a golfer, it's not just okay, here's a couple weeks, we'll do this for a little while, or here's a program for this week, here's a program for next week, and just mixing it all up. There's a long-term goal in mind, and you got to kind of figure out, okay, here's where we're starting, how are we going to progress? So how would you progress somebody that's in this stage?
Depending on how much lean mass they start with, how much muscle mass they start with, and how much they want to end with, you're going to want to dedicate anywhere from 18 to 16 weeks of training to one specific goal, like hypertrophy. That's enough time to see gains, but it's a short enough goal that you're not sidetracked. You're not, I'll get to that later, or this is a long-term process. There has to be a sense of urgency. So I would keep the block of training dedicated to hypertrophy or any other strength quality for that matter in the 8 to 16 week range. So for somebody who's, let's say, to make the math easy, 200 pounds and 25% body fat, that person only has 150 pounds of lean muscle or lean weight, and some of that being muscle mass. So we would want to bring that up. You would need a period of 18 to 16 weeks to get that up 8, 10, 12 pounds even.
Gotcha. Okay. So have a goal in mind, stick to it for a dedicated period of time, and basically pretty much so you can say, okay, this is what I'm shooting for. This is, so you're not willy-nilly and just kind of making stuff up as you go along, pretty much.
For sure. Like I said, typically my programs will run 4 weeks at a time. So within that hypertrophy phase, there's going to be training variables that you change. So your time under tension may be 40 seconds in the first phase, 50 the second, 60 in the third, 70. That's just one example. So there's always some type of progression. It's not going to be 16 weeks of the same program every week, every day. There's going to be changes within that block of training.
Gotcha. All right. Well, so hypertrophy is one. Another huge one is fat loss. So let's look at, somebody that wants to get in the gym. They need to trim down, lean up. They want to, they've been reading their diet books. They've been reading their Men's Health magazine, looking at their programs. What should they actually be focusing on in their training in order to cut their weight or cut down their lean mass?
For fat loss, the biggest thing I would focus on is lactic acid production. That's going to cause a huge growth hormone response, which can be great for fat loss. So again, you're going to want high time under tension in a fat loss phase and a high amount of work. We're talking a huge amount of mechanical work, point A to point B, lots of reps, lots of sets, tons of mechanical work, high time under tension. That's going to create a lot of lactic acid, a lot of growth hormone. It'll put you in a caloric deficit if your diet's on point. So those are some of the things you're going to look at for fat loss.
So what are some of the possible rep ranges, possible sets, that type of stuff?
You're going to be 10 plus. Depending on the exercise, something like leg press, you can go all the way up to 100. Some exercises are going to respond better to higher reps, like, for example, the leg press, the soleus, so things like the seated calf raise. You can go super high on exercises like that. It's going to be important that you use big bang for your buck exercises also for fat loss. So don't discount the bench presses, the dips, the chins, things like that. You can't get the same type of hormonal response or muscular response from an external rotation or a calf raise as you can from a chin or a squat or a bench press.
Gotcha. And just to jump back to the bulking phase, what kinds of exercise? You just mentioned some of the bigger bang for your buck exercises. What are some of the style or type of exercise that you would generally put into a hypertrophy hypertrophy program, and are they different than a fat loss program?
Not necessarily. You're always going to want to favor the most bang for your buck exercises. Again, the chins, the dips, the benches, rows, squats, deadlifts. And as you get towards the end of your workout and you've been pretty physically taxed, then that's the point where you can focus on some smaller, more isolation exercises like rotator cuff work or scapular retractors, things like that.
Gotcha. Yeah, so putting some of the more high demand exercise at the beginning of a program, first, just because, I mean, that's when you've got your most energy, that's when you're freshest, your brain is ready to go. You know, when you see people going to the gym, they start out doing like rotator cuff exercise and calf raises, it's almost like they're kind of wearing out their energy. They're getting rid of some of the energy that they have, and then they go into some of these other things, and they're not going to be able to perform at their best for each lift.
Exactly. You're going to, like I said, the bang for the buck exercises come first. You're not going to need much energy, to be honest, to perform an external rotation or a calf raise or any abduction or adduction or anything like that. That's almost, not to discount it, but in a phase like fat loss or hypertrophy, it's almost an afterthought.
Gotcha. And what about cardio?
Not a fan. not a fan at all. It's just not. It's just not as efficient as weight training is. You can get plenty of heart health benefits from weight training. That's the big one for obvious, called cardiovascular activity. I'm not saying don't do it, but to most efficiently spend your time to get the most out of your workout, I would favor weight training every time.
Gotcha. And is there any situation where you would have somebody do any kind of long duration, moderate cardio stuff?
Jeffrey,
I'm going to put you right on the spot here.
You know, moderate is not in my vocabulary.
I know. It's go all or go none.
I guess if you had a golfer that was also a bodybuilder and was 4 weeks out from a bodybuilding show and going on tour, I guess you could do it like that. But no, I'm never going to recommend unless somebody's super out of shape, obese, and that's the only thing they can do, it's going to be weight training every time.
Gotcha. I only know of one bodybuilding golfer, and that's Michael Manavian, who was on the show not too long ago. But I don't think even he would recommend doing that. All right. So let's move on, kind of along the same lines, because I think this is awesome. I think we're really kind of breaking down some things that people can take home and utilize when they're looking at their program, or if they're a coach, just some reiteration on, the fact that what they're doing is making sense for their golfer or for their client. What about training for strength? I think this is a big misconception in the general world as far as, getting in, lifting weights. Most people assume, well, you're lifting weights, you're getting stronger. How is that different from training for hypertrophy?
Well, initially, you're going to get hypertrophy gains and strength gains simultaneously, like we talked about. But once someone has a base of muscle mass you can actually work with, you're going to need to dedicate more specific training time to strength. And that means a lower volume of sets than hypertrophy. You're going to be doing far fewer reps. You're going to be doing 5 or less reps for pure strength gains. Your time under tension is going to be less. We're talking 20 seconds or less. And your rest periods are going to be much longer for strength gains. That's a hard one for people to grasp, because when you're doing, let's say, a set of 3 to 5 reps, you're not going to be out of breath like you're going to be during a fat loss workout or a hypertrophy workout. You're not sweating like you are in those other types of workouts. But because the nervous system takes so much longer to recover than the muscular system, you need those longer rest periods to get the most out of the work you're doing. It's like I said, it's tough for people to do a set of 3 reps wait 2 minutes and do another set. But you're definitely going to see quicker strength gains that way.
Yeah, people, unless they've done it for a while, they get bored. You know, they expect to be moving and running and sweating and, all that stuff. And they feel like, I've had so many times where somebody's in the gym and they're like, let's go, let's get to the next exercise. And it's like, no, take your time. You need to rest. You need to chill out a little bit. They're like, I feel fine. Let's go. And to explain that to them, that it's not necessarily you sweating and panting, but it's the fact that, your brain needs to recover, your neurological system needs to recover in order to then produce as much force in that next lift to be able to move that weight even more efficiently. And I think that I'm sure you've had this experience. I know I have, that when you're really in a power training session and you do it right, 3 reps can gas you.
Yes, it can. Yes, it can. I know the current trend in parts of the fitness world is to do more as fast as possible, super short rest periods. That's fine if your specific competition calls for that. But when you're specifically training for strength, like I said, you're definitely going to see better strength gains with an adequate rest period. You need to be fully recovered between sets to get the best strength gains.
All right, and so if you have somebody that has trained for a while, they're an athlete. Let's say it's a little bit of a higher level person. Can you mix and match these different types of exercises, like on a weekly basis or in the same phase, or is that something that you would do, or do you pick one thing and go for it?
That would have to be a super advanced athlete who's trained for a long time to start mixing qualities. I know there are coaches that do it, but I prefer not to. But given a tight time frame with a lot of work to do, you could potentially mix strength qualities. You could train strength, hypertrophy, endurance all in the same week. But like I said, if you have like a dedicated off season or a specific block of training where you have the ability to break up your training and dedicate one quality, you're definitely going to see better gains that way. Because you can't linearly progress in each strength quality, or we would all just train every quality in every session. That's why I break it up. You're going to see, if you dedicate yourself to 16 weeks of hypertrophy, you're going to see much better gains that way.
Right. What would you suggest? And I know that you don't work with any professional golfers or that type of stuff, but obviously you've worked with a ton of professional athletes, and you may have worked with some golfers that I don't know about. But these guys have such a small off season these days. It seems like you turn on the TV and there's pretty much golf on almost year round, depending on where they're playing. And a lot of these guys don't really get the 3-month period that you might see with baseball or some of these other things. What do you suggest, and maybe this is a question more to answer for the coaches that are out there in designing programs, what do you suggest for somebody that has a super short off season, maybe hardly any off season at all, and then they're on the road a lot for the rest of the year?
I would hone in on the one strength quality that's going to make the biggest performance improvement. And just from the outside looking in, like I said, like you mentioned, I'm not huge in the golf world, but a lot of these guys are going to need hypertrophy. And even because golf isn't as demanding physically as something like football or like hockey, you still can get a good amount of work in during the season. Guys are going to be playing from Thursday through Sunday. They probably are going to have to travel, but it's going to give you a couple days to really hammer it out in the gym.
And why would you say that hypertrophy is a big one for a golfer? A lot of people think, why would a golfer want to get bigger during the season or in the off season? How is that going to help them?
Basically, if I try to compare it to a car, we need a bigger engine before we can really hit the gas. So if if the engine is muscle mass and hitting the gas pedal is strength, we want a bigger engine first. We want more to work with before we try and worry about strength or power. Like I said, a lot of these guys, you're going to be in the 150, 160 pounds of lean mass. You're going to be able to, again, you're going to be able to get strength gains and hypertrophy at the same time, just training with hypertrophy parameters.
Right. Gotcha. And you mentioned the idea of strength and power. There's so much talk these days about increasing club head speed and power in the game of golf, and you gotta get more powerful. When designing programs, strength and power, what's the difference there, and how do you train differently or design a program differently based on wanting one or two of those things?
Basically, strength and power are differentiated by speed. Strength can be slow, power has to be fast. So training wise, that's going to, if you're moving a barbell at a slow rate of speed, if you're grinding out reps in the 1 to 5 range, that's working strength. You're going to be in the similar rep range for power, but we're really talking about bar speed. We could be talking about med ball throws, jumps of all kinds, plyo push-ups, things like that are going to produce power. So like I said, speed is what's going to differentiate those two qualities.
Gotcha. All right. Well, hopefully that gave you guys out there, I know every time I talk to TE, I learn something new. I learn a lot of new things. And so hopefully this is just kind of a baseline for designing your own programs. Don't be afraid to go out and try new things and get in the gym. And it's better to get in and try it and realize that you're putting in the effort. You're working. Ideally, if you can get yourself in front of a qualified professional, get yourself assessed, get yourself tested, so you know what you need to work on. Again, it's so important to have these goals and to be able to figure out where you can get better and what's going to make the most beneficial change. What's the weak link in your chain, and if you can fix that, it's going to make a huge, huge difference. So TE, before we kind of wrap things up here, I got to ask you, as a guy who's not, again, not in the golf world, but is an expert in strength and conditioning in the body and the way that it works and physiology and anatomy, what are some of the things that you've seen either trainers have their golfers do or just random guys in the gym, that are working on their golf game? What are some of the things you've seen do that you just look at and you're like, what the hell is that? And there's no way that's doing what that guy thinks it's doing.
I would say mimicking the golf swing on a pulley machine. It is the craziest. It's the craziest exercise. We know rotational strength is definitely something that can benefit a golfer, but Joe Blow just going in the weight room and doing countless wood chops / golf swings on the pulley machine. I don't understand it. Like I said, I could probably out wood chop anybody on the PGA Tour, but I am definitely not a golfer. So there's not much of a correlation between wood chop abilities and golf abilities. I wish those guys would, like I said, spend more time with the high bang for your buck exercises.
Right. Very good. I love it. All right. And I'm going to ask you if you happen to have maybe a good resource or a book that would be good for, maybe regarding the stuff that we kind of talked about, a good resource for, first of all, the golfers or the listeners that aren't necessarily strength coaches, something that more of the Joe Blow could read, the layperson, that they would get a little bit of insight into this type of stuff.
Definitely. Here's a book with a cheesy title, but it is a great resource. Ian King, a strength coach from Australia, wrote it. It's called Get Buffed. It really goes in depth into all of those qualities we talked about. So all the different training parameters, all the different training qualities, strength, hypertrophy. He goes over time under tension, exercise selection, rest periods, tempos. He goes over all of those things in depth. Another one would be the Poliquin Principles by Charles Poliquin. And again, he's going to go over those things pretty in depth. You should be able to put together at least a basic program after reading either one of those.
Nice. And then is there anything even, and I know that those books go into quite a bit of detail, anything even that you would recommend more so for the trainers or the coaches that are out there, if not just these?
For the coaches, I would say Science and Practice of Strength Training by Zatsiorsky. That one's more theoretical. You're going to have to apply it with your own style, your own methods, but there's a lot of great theoretical information in that one.
Gotcha. So be a strength training ninja by the time you're done with that one.
Exactly.
Very nice. All right, man. Well, once again, I can't thank you enough for coming on to the show. Hopefully, I know that everybody's going to get a ton out of the information that you shared today. Is there any last parting piece of advice that you'd like to share with the listeners?
No.
Awesome. That is fantastic. Well, this is about the time that I would say, where can people get a hold of you? How can they reach you? But obviously, we got none of that because, again, you're the Heisenberg of strength and conditioning. And so I think we're just going to cut it and leave it at that.
They can contact you, and you can contact me if that works.
I'll tell you what. Here's what we'll do. If you have a question for T.E Frances, and it's T.E. capital F-R-A-N-C-E-S, we're gonna have you tweet it to 18 Strong at 18 Strong _. I'm working on getting at 18 Strong just by itself for Twitter, but tweet at 18 Strong. And hashtag T.E Frances and ask whatever question you want, and I will make sure that T.E gets the question. And we've even talked about possibly in the future getting him on to answer some possible program design questions or just different random questions that you guys might have as the audience. And we'll start posting that up on the blog, and maybe we'll have you on as a two-timer on the 18 Strong podcast.
Sounds great.
All right, buddy. I appreciate it.
Anytime.
All right, man. Talk to you soon.
See ya.
Okay, everybody. I hope that you enjoyed the podcast with Mr. T.E Frances there. As you can see, the dude is smart. He knows his stuff, and I can honestly say that I'm glad that we have gotten back in touch, and I've had the opportunity to kind of bounce some ideas off of him and have really learned a bunch of stuff from him in regards to strength training. And, moving from the physical therapy world into the strength and conditioning and working with golfers and, just having the ability to know somebody that has worked with athletes of the highest level, college, professional, from all different parts across the nation in all different sports. It's cool to be able to bounce ideas and theories and, really just kind of learn the basics from. So as you can tell, he's got a whole lot of information, and I really do hope that he's willing to come on again on the podcast in the future. But also, I think it's going to be pretty cool to have, some questions from you guys, the general audience, people that, you guys are the ones that this whole podcast is for, this whole website is for. And so I want to know what questions you want answered. And if I can't answer them, or if we can just, dedicate them to T.E. and let him answer them, because once he gets going, he's got a great personality, and I think his style will really come out in his writing, and you guys will definitely enjoy what you learn, because you'll get so much information from him. So please shoot some questions. Again, hashtag T.E Frances on Twitter. I think we'll have some fun with that, and just having the mystery man, not knowing who he is, and he has sworn me to secrecy that I will not tell a soul who he is. So I'm going to leave you guys hanging, and we'll go from there. So once again, thank you guys for tuning into the 18 Strong podcast. It's been a pleasure. Don't forget to train hard, practice smart, and play better golf. Adios.
Thanks for listening to the 18 Strong podcast at www.18strong.com. And remember, train hard, practice smart, and play better golf.
And how do you spell T.E Frances? Or how do you spell Francis, with an E at the end?
Yes.
Okay. All right, because I might throw that in as a hashtag.
This is going to be awesome.
Dude, I can't wait.